The front door closed without its usual warning chime, the soft click swallowed by the thick quiet of the house. Daniel stood still in the foyer, one hand still curled around the handle of his briefcase, the other resting against the wall as if to steady himself. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something warmer beneath it, milk, maybe, or the clean sweetness of baby soap. The house felt different when the babies were asleep, as though it held its breath along with them. He had come home 2 days earlier than planned, a rare gap opening in a calendar usually packed tight with meetings and flights. The idea of walking into the nursery unannounced had filled him with a nervous excitement that tightened his chest. He pictured the surprise on his wife's face later, the way she would laugh and scold him for not calling first. But she wasn't here. Her car was gone, just as she'd said it would be when she mentioned visiting her mother. That meant only one adult was in the house now, besides him. Lydia. He hadn't intended to sneak. He wasn't hiding. Still, he found himself moving quietly, his steps measured, his shoulders tense. Somewhere upstairs, a sound drifted down the hallway. Not crying. Not the sharp, panicked wail that had ruled their lives for months when the triplets were newborns. This was different. It was music, low and steady, woven with gentle shushing, as if someone were smoothing the edges of the afternoon itself. Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't realized how accustomed he had become to the soundtrack of fussing and alarms, of baby monitors crackling awake at the slightest stir. The singing felt like a secret, something not meant for adult ears. He followed it without thinking, passing the living room with its carefully arranged furniture that no one ever used anymore, past the staircase where framed photos documented the shock and joy of 3 tiny faces side by side in the hospital bassinet. As he climbed the stairs, the sound grew clearer. The melody was unfamiliar, lilting, rising and falling with a patient rhythm. It carried a weight that felt old, older than the house, older than him. He reached the nursery door and stopped. The door stood half open, a narrow slice of the room visible through the gap. Light poured in from the window, the pale gold of late afternoon turning the dust motes into drifting sparks. Daniel leaned forward slightly, curiosity pulling him closer, and then he saw her. Lydia sat on the rug, not on the chair by the crib or the small sofa against the wall, but on the floor itself, legs folded beneath her as if she had settled there for a long while. One baby rested against her shoulder, his cheek pressed into the soft fabric of her apron, a tiny fist tangled in the edge of it. Another lay sprawled across her lap, mouth slightly open, breath deep and even, the rise and fall of his chest slow and sure. The third, his smallest, the one who always seemed to need more time, more patience, was cradled in her arms. His eyes were open, dark and intent, fixed on Lydia's face with a focus that startled Daniel. It was the look of someone listening with his whole being. Lydia swayed gently, barely rocking, as if even the movement were measured to avoid disturbing the fragile peace she had created. Her voice was barely more than a whisper now, the song threading through the quiet like a promise. One hand supported the baby's back, the other traced slow, absent-minded circles between his shoulder blades, a motion so natural it might have been part of her breathing. Daniel felt something inside him seize and hold. He had expected order. He had expected efficiency. Lydia was good at her job, he knew that. She followed schedules, kept notes, anticipated needs. But this was something else. Entirely. His eyes drifted around the room, taking in details he might have missed on any other day. The crib sheets were freshly changed, their corners tucked with military precision. On the dresser, a small notebook lay open, its pages filled with neat handwriting, feeding times, nap lengths, little observations written in the margins, fussy before noon, smiled after bath, storm coming. A bottle sat in a bowl of water, cooling carefully, its temperature being managed without a single beep or alarm. A folded blanket rested nearby, positioned as though it might be needed at any moment. The window was cracked open just enough to let in fresh air. Outside, the sky was shifting, clouds thickening in the distance. Inside, the room smelled faintly of warm milk and soap, the comforting scent of cleanliness without sterility. It felt lived in, tended, watched over. Daniel realized he wasn't breathing properly. His chest felt tight, his throat thick. He had spent months worrying about the baby's health, about doing everything right, about trusting someone else with the most vulnerable parts of his life. He had vetted resumes, checked references, installed cameras he pretended not to check too often. He had told himself that love was enough, that his wife's instincts and his planning would carry them through. And yet here was Lydia, doing something no checklist could capture. The baby on her shoulder stirred, letting out a small sigh, his body relaxing even further as if surrendering completely. Lydia adjusted her hold without looking, her fingers finding the right place by muscle memory alone. The song shifted slightly, a new phrase folding into the old, seamless and unhurried. Daniel took a step back, then another, afraid that the smallest sound would break the spell. He felt like an intruder in a sacred space, someone who had stumbled upon a ritual not meant to be observed. He wanted to retreat, to let the moment exist without his presence altering it. And yet he couldn't look away. For the first time since the babies had come home, he felt something unclench inside him. A realization settled, heavy and undeniable. While he had been away, while he had been worrying from afar, someone else had been here, listening to their breaths, learning their rhythms, giving them the kind of attention that couldn't be rushed or outsourced. The singing continued, steady as a heartbeat. Daniel stood in the hallway, frozen not by fear, but by the quiet understanding that what he was witnessing mattered more than he had known how to ask for. A single floorboard betrayed him with a soft, tired creak. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the hush of the nursery, as if the house itself had spoken out of turn. Lydia's voice faltered mid-note, the song thinning into silence. She looked up sharply, her dark eyes widening for just a moment before settling on Daniel's face. Surprise flickered there, quickly followed by something like worry, as though she were about to apologize for an offense she couldn't yet name. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The baby in her arms shifted, his fingers flexing against the fabric of her apron, and she resumed the gentle sway automatically, her body choosing comfort over confusion. The song did not return, but the rhythm did, a quiet rocking that spoke its own language. Sir, she whispered, keeping her voice low. I didn't hear you come in. Daniel swallowed. He was acutely aware of how large he must look standing there, how out of place his travel-worn suit was against the soft colors of the nursery. He set his briefcase down by the door with exaggerated care, as though it were something fragile. That's all right, he said softly. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, rougher than he intended. I came back. Early. Lydia nodded, her gaze dropping briefly to the babies as if checking that they were still settled. Your wife said she would be out this afternoon, she replied. I was putting them down. The smallest one, he had trouble today. Daniel stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. I can see, he murmured. The words felt insufficient, almost foolish, but they were all he had in that moment. The children looked impossibly small from this angle, folded into sleep and quiet trust. They look peaceful. A hint of a smile touched Lydia's mouth, soft and fleeting. He feels the weather, she said, glancing toward the window where the light had dimmed slightly as clouds gathered. Some children do. When storms are coming, he won't settle. I sang to him. My grandmother used to sing it to us when we were little. Daniel watched her hand continue its slow circles on the baby's back. He noticed the fine tremor in her fingers, not from uncertainty but from effort, the careful control of someone holding still for a long time. It worked, he said quietly. She nodded again. It usually does. He stood there, unsure of what to do with his hands, with the gratitude pressing against his ribs. He had rehearsed a dozen scenarios in his head during the flight home, walking in to find chaos, or rigid order, or something in between. He hadn't prepared for this gentle authority, this calm that seemed to radiate outward and soften everything it touched. Thank you, he said at last. The words felt small, but he let them stand. For taking such good care of them. Lydia looked almost uncomfortable. It is my job, she replied, though there was something firm beneath the humility, something that suggested the statement was both more and less than the truth. Daniel shook his head slightly. It's more than that, he said. He gestured vaguely toward the room, toward the children, toward the quiet. I can see that. She hesitated, then carefully shifted the baby in her arms, preparing to stand. Daniel instinctively stepped forward, ready to help, but she gave him a brief, reassuring look and rose with practiced ease. The movement was fluid, controlled, as if she had performed it countless times before. The baby barely stirred. She crossed the short distance to the crib and lowered him in, her hands lingering for a moment as she adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. He sighed in his sleep, a tiny sound that made Daniel's chest tighten unexpectedly. Lydia paused, watching to be sure he remained settled, then turned back for the others. One by one, she transferred them, each movement precise, unhurried. The baby from her shoulder went next, then the one from her lap. She smoothed their hair, checked their positions, adjusted the light to a softer glow. When she was done, she stood very still for a moment, listening. 3 small chests rose and fell in quiet harmony. Daniel realized he was holding his breath again. He let it out slowly. They trust you, he said before he could stop himself. Lydia glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. Babies know when someone is listening, she said simply. They feel it. The words struck him with surprising force. He thought of all the times he had rushed through feedings, half focused on emails or calls, telling himself that providing was a form of love. He thought of the nights he had stood in the doorway, exhausted, unsure, letting Lydia take over because she seemed to know what to do when he did not. I want you to know, he began, then stopped, searching for the right way to say what he meant. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you should tell us. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the offer without seizing it. I have what I need, she said. They have what they need. That is enough. Outside, a low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. The light shifted again, deepening the shadows in the corners of the room. Daniel felt the weight of the day settling over him, the fatigue of travel finally catching up. But beneath it was something else, relief, and a quiet certainty he hadn't felt in months. He moved to the door, pausing there. I'll let them sleep, he said. Take the rest of the afternoon a little easier if you can. Lydia smiled, this time more openly. I will, she said. I'll be right downstairs if you need me. As he stepped back into the hallway, Daniel glanced once more at the nursery. Lydia was already tidying, her movements soft, efficient, careful not to disturb the peace she had built. The door closed with the lightest click behind him. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence, to the faint echo of a lullaby that seemed to linger in the walls. He understood then that coming home early had given him more than a surprise. It had shown him that love sometimes arrived quietly, wearing an apron, doing the work without asking to be seen.